Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of a Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs.
Welcome everyone to the podcast. We hope to provide you with lots of resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as an effective literacy teacher. And every so often, we like to bring along a special guest to help us illustrate what we're talking about. And today we have a person who has a wonderful story to tell, Wayne Dutschke. And we hope to make some great connections with your students and their own writing in your classroom. Writing, Sharon, do you think is one of those areas where we're looking to motivate our students and sometimes it's pretty difficult?
Yes. So we've actually called today's podcast, We All Have Stories to Tell, because we think that it's finding, if we want to have children writing stories or writing in a way where we can really hear their voice and have them motivated and engaged to write, then we want to help them find the stories that they have that are part of their lives already.
Because sometimes writing can be a bit formula driven where teachers have a structure, which is good sometimes, but sometimes that can restrict a bit.
Well, we know full well in Australia that we sometimes limit the kinds of stories or the structures that we can talk about for imaginative writing. But imaginative writing, which I guess we are focusing on a little bit today because stories fit into imaginative writing, but even for those listening in Australia, our Australian curriculum talks imaginative, doesn't talk just narrative, but imaginative writing. So imaginative encompasses a whole lot of things.
Not just narratives.
Not just narratives.
Oh, right.
And when we talk about our own stories, we might classify them as imaginative, but we should also be able to draw on the facts and the how things played out. The retelling of an event is and can be a richly imaginative and creative piece of writing. And, in what structure we do that, that's what we don't want to limit. But I think what we're really trying to explore today is thinking about the importance of finding our own stories that we have to tell.
So making more meaning to your story, sort of, is that another...
Do you know, even more, the way I'd probably say it is, really burning to write.
Okay.
Because I want to share that. And if we talk about this often on our podcast that, why do people write? Why do authors write? Why do writers write? It's because they have something to share with us about the world and to help us understand more about the world, or to understand others, or to understand ourselves. And I think, two of the reasons we've brought Wayne on today is because he has a story to tell that helps. We'll ask him that question. I'm about to say why I think he wrote it. Here we go.
Just before you
Wayne, that was the little chuckle in the background was Wayne. Let's welcome him. Let's get him into the conversation. Although, did I cut you short, Phil?
You did, but we'll go on. But,
no, you can.
Far be it from me to...
No, go back to your point.
I was just going to say, I love that phrase, burning to write. You know how we've got our 7 timeless T's. It's almost another one, but it doesn't start with T, so it's a problem.
No, but think about where would that fit.
Yes.
So if we talk about tantalising text.
Yep.
What if I'm writing a text?
Make it tantalising.
then if I'm burning to write, then what kind of text is that going to be? It's not going to be a dull formulaic kind of one. It's going to be tantalising to others.
Anyway, I think we should bring Wayne in. You're holding him back. Sharon.
Yes, I can see Wayne thinking, when do I get to say something?
I'm ready to sit here and listen. I'm happy.
So Wayne, what's...
Well, first of all, because Wayne sits here not just because he has a story to tell, but first and foremost, we might say, well, this is something a bit out of the box for a teaching literacy podcast, but we've brought Wayne on because he's a winemaker.
Thanks for that, Sharon.
And we want to, and that first and foremost is that's what you burn to do.
That's how I got burnt out.
That's how you got burnt out.
So Wayne, how did you get into winemaking? What was the...
Yeah, start the story.
Well, firstly, thanks Sharon and Phil for having me along, and hello to all those folk who are listening wherever you might be. I got into winemaking because I spent a fair bit of time out in the vineyard that belonged to my grandfather and his brothers. It was a few miles up the road, and I used to ride my push bike from home. I think it was about 17 miles in the old talk, however many kilometres that is these days.
And whereabouts in South Australia? Whereabouts?
I grew up at Elizabeth, and my mum came from Lindock, a small township in the Barossa Valley, which we know today is famous for making good red wine. But when I first interested in this game was it was more of a fortified wine area, and also a place where dairy cows roamed, as well as sheep and cropping. These days there's more grapevines than dairy cows. But, I just enjoyed being out there in the fresh air and on a motorbike or on a tractor.
Yes,
And it was Mum who put the idea in my head, because my grandfather was not only a grape grower with his brothers, but he ended up becoming the chairman of the cooperative winery in the Barossa called, Barossa Co-op. I don't know how they come up with that name. Clever fellas.
Yeah.
Yes, very creative. Yeah.
Well, they traded under a name called Kaiserstuhl way back then because of the German heritage of the area.
Now that I did not know that was their...
Yeah,
so that
was their brand.
Right, okay.
Yeah, which was a big brand. I mean, it was finally bought by Penfolds, who lived next door later on in life. But, because there was a vineyard that grew grapes, and the Semlers, the family on my mum's side, were grape growers for mainly the co-op way back then. We learnt about grapes and grape varieties and how they grew, and then, the next step is what to do with those grapes, and you could turn it to wine. So Mum thought maybe it was a good idea for me to get out there in the wine industry. It might be something I'm interested in. And so...
so how old were you then when...
I was about 10 minutes from leaving year 12.
Right, as Mum is thinking, where do we get this guy?
That's right, I don't know where they're hanging around at home. I think I might have been during year 12 sometime.
Yeah, but it seemed like something that you were surrounded by, and so you knew people that were around you that had this industry, and you...
Yeah, and up the road was Roseworthy Agricultural College, and every time there was an open day, we'd go up there and sit on the trailer that's towed by a tractor and go visit the chooks and the ducks and the horses and the dairy cows and the winery. Yeah. And always enjoyed that. And, having an agricultural school close by that taught winemaking, it, made a fair bit of sense perhaps to head that way. But what I did, and it was a requirement for Roseworthy way back then, is that they encouraged folk to have some industry experience before taking up one of the, positions at the school in learning winemaking. And so I got pen to paper. It's a long time ago, of course. I didn't have emails and things like that then. And my grandfather was actually at Kaiserstuhl. He'd actually passed on. I'm talking for me, it was the late 70s. My grandfather died in the early 70s. But there was a story about he and the boys at Kaiserstuhl bringing this German winemaker in many years ago to help with sparkling wine production typically
okay.
at that point. And his name was Wolf Blass. So I thought, well, maybe he's a good bloke to write to start with and see what he says. So I wrote him a letter saying, I'm Oscar Semler's grandson and you got a job. And anyhow, Johnny Glaitzer, his winemaker, wrote back and said, why don't you come up and have a chat with us? And they said at that point they didn't have any winemaking role, like a cellar hand role that they get a guy out of high school for.
Yeah.
But why don't you write to these folk and we'll stand behind you? So I wrote 10 letters and got 8 positive responses saying, doesn't happen like that these days either, does it?
No.
But the power of the letter.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's true. And some were, just for vintage, some were in the lab, some were in cellars. And,
Right. Oh,
and I got to choose. Yeah.
Whoa.
And Yalumba was one, was the further distance I had to travel to get there, but they offered 12 months in the cellar. So I thought, well, that would be a good start.
Yes.
And after, the first couple of weeks, it all became quite interesting and exciting. And then vintage kicked in and many long hours and, some tough experiences, even just getting crook from sulfur dioxide because we used to use plenty in the industry way back then and other things that you come across that you don't see today. Anyhow, thought, hey, yeah, maybe I should go to Roseworthy, and that's how it happened. So 3 years at Roseworthy, and then I came out with a ticket and ventured from winery to winery after that.
And at some stage you decided to start your own winery, Dutschke Wines.
Yeah, didn't plan it very well, but didn't plan it to be a winery as such, but just thought, why don't we make some wine from the vineyard? Uncle Ken Semler, and now Helen, his wife, have the vineyard that was Oscar's share of the farm, I guess.
Yes.
And Ken, being almost a pioneer in his time, he'd spent time in the Air Force. He came back with a few bob in his pocket where most growers had none. And he thought, if we're going to be growing grapes, what variety should we be planting and what shouldn't we have in the ground? And so speaking to other winemakers, they suggested planting this, that and the other. And he was a bit ahead of his time in putting Chardonnay in and varieties like Merlot and Morcheras and ripping out varieties like Muscat and Tokay and things like that we were using for fortified wine back then. So more of a table wine focus. And
I just love that your winery's at the top of God's Hill Road, which is really close to heaven.
it's just
Isn't it?
You can see
very
it from
close.
there. Yeah.
I just think that's a great name for a road. Yeah.
But I'm just listening to I just can't help but think all the lovely vocabulary and language that comes with this, the
Not from my mouth.
Tokay and No, but just even all the all the grape varieties and all of the, there's all that knowledge, all that, that depth of understanding that comes with anyone's area of expertise. And I can't help but listen to all of that going, just listen to the richness of, what are the grape varieties and, and what, processes
all the
being
processes
used, at different times that we use this process. And then it was, less of the sulfur dioxide.
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That all of these things, will lead us to part of that explanation of why it is that, winemakers end up with purple hands. But anyway, we don't need to go there quite yet. You had another question, Phil.
Well, I think it'd be great to get onto the, because Wayne, you thought at some stage you wanted to write a story about the winemaking and...
Well, actually, did you think...
I didn't think of
No.
it. Okay. I just did it.
All right. You just...
well, after our first child was born, I married an American girl, Brenda. Met her through selling our wine in the US, and she was working for the importer at the time.
Yep.
And traded with her father a crate of wine and brought home his daughter. So anyhow, they came over to visit once we had Sammy, our firstborn, and we're at the airport waving goodbye to Grandma and Grandpa, and Brenda's mum was a little unhappy, and she says, I'm going back to the US and I'm going to write a story about a grandmother that lives so far away from her grandchildren.
Oh,
And
see,
I thought,
and there's
good on you. You know, you should do that because she's got plenty of time and she's quite resourceful, and
yeah.
why not? And she says, well, if I do that, why don't you write a book about my dad, the winemaker?
Oh,
And walking back
what
to
a great seed.
walking back to the car park from that discussion, I thought, it is a good idea because there's so many books about the technology of winemaking and visit the vineyards and picture books of various regions and
Yeah.
a lot of the same, but I didn't know of a kids' book on wine. And there's plenty of kids that grow up in vineyards and amongst barrels and have mum or dad squashing grapes.
Yes.
So
Yep.
that's a good one. And then it just sat with me for a while. I didn't have any words in my head, but we'd always been reading to the kids too, I guess if I can talk about the book in a little while, if I forget, one thing I regret, and I guess it's almost like an artist when they finish a painting, they never really finish it. They just decide to stop because they could add a little bit more or they could tweak it here.
Yeah, exactly.
And if I'd had it again, I would have put, of course, both kids in there.
Yeah.
Right.
Poor old Jackson.
Yes, missed the...
He could be behind the barrels maybe, but he doesn't make an appearance. And because I started the book when we only had Sammy.
Yes.
But I was in the US one time and flying between one place and another over there, and I was having a glass of claret, and all of a sudden the words came to my head, I was sitting there in the dark, and the plane, I think we were flying from Baltimore across back to California or something, and, oh, wow, that's pretty interesting. And I used to like, well, my favourite author is Dr. Seuss.
I was just going to say where, because I bet we're going to be able to connect when you start saying that those words just came to me. It will be based on something that's in your, what we have often referred to in here as like that linguistic repertoire, because of what we've read or what we've had read to us, that we can attach our words can start flowing through that storehouse that we have.
Yeah.
So there
Because I
there
always
it
found
was.
one of the fun books to read was, Green Eggs and Ham.
Yes, yeah.
It's fantastic the way that's written. And there's rhyme, rhythm and repetition.
Yes.
And I thought, hey, wacko, what rhymes with fermentation?
What does rhyme with fermentation?
I don't know.
Right. So that word's not in there?
No, that's right.
No, so you avoided that one. Well, there probably were a few words you might have had to avoid, thinking, I can't think of one that's going to rhyme with that.
No, but
All right, so that's such a key insight. Thank you, Wayne, to that, of really saying that the words came. You didn't have the words until you found until a sip of
wine.
a bit of claret and Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
Well, a claret and green eggs and ham.
That's it.
And you were away. So just read us for a start. So the book's called My Dad Has Purple Hands, and we'll talk a bit more about the title in a moment. But just read for us. Let's just hear that first, how the story starts, and let's hear
All right.
how you found those words.
I'll read the first couple pages here. And the first scene's, the story's not about me. It's about any winemaker. And unfortunately, it looks like a guy. It could be my mum has purple hands too.
Yes.
Some folk have suggested I come out with that book too, but
Yeah.
this burnt me out. Anyhow.
I know, it's hard
vocab.
work. It's hard to write a book.
Yeah, actually, the words, they just flowed. And we only tweaked them a little bit afterwards. I wrote them on a serviette in the dark.
Oh,
and
look at that. Oh.
then when I got to wherever I was heading,
Yeah.
I just took the layers off because I'd written over the top of these words that had come out.
Yes.
And a few we just changed a bit, but it was pretty much, it just floated. A bit like, I guess, when sometimes, a musician writes a song.
Yes.
The tune comes or the lyrics.
Yep.
Yeah. They often say that. It just comes.
Yeah.
But nothing's come since, I must tell you.
Well, has your mother-in-law given you the challenge of creating another book?
She's never written her book yet. So.
I was going to ask. I was going to ask, did she
Still
come good
waiting.
on the bargain?
No.
Yeah.
So you'll stay for a while.
Yeah, there's no follow-up to this one, I don't think. But, you never know. If I have some time again one day, maybe. Anyhow, I'll read the first couple pages here.
Yes.
Yeah, the first scene's a young girl sitting on the lap of her father outside the winery, and he's not only got purple hands, but he has purple feet. So they're sitting on the step there outside the winery, and story goes, my dad has purple hands, and I think that's neat. They're the same colour as his big purple feet. This isn't strange, well, not to me, but my friends often ask me, how can this be? My dad has a vineyard with many old vines. They grow on hillside all in straight lines, planted by Grandad way back in time in a place that's famous for dark purple wine. And there's a scene of vines all in straight rows and the bright red truck parked out alongside.
Oh, the famous red truck.
Yeah. Which I don't have anymore.
Oh, don't you?
No,
I
I
thought.
had to declutter. So
Oh, okay. We won't go that track with that
no.
story then, because there is another story in that. But yes,
I
Right,
can see
so
the rhyme is fantastic, isn't it?
the
it's-
rhythm,
and the rhythm,
the
yeah.
rhyme, and there's repetition. Have you got repetition in this? But actually, what I already sense in the repetitions, I love how just in 2 pages that word purple becomes a significant
yeah.
word in it. And I know
And we
it's in the
could
title, but it's, I like that keeps appearing.
Yeah, and we could have written red or black, but it doesn't.
No.
Purple's got a nice feel to it.
Yeah.
It feels
Yeah.
good to say, feels good in the mouth, feels great to the ear.
Yeah,
But
it does.
Sharon,
yeah.
I reckon we should hear the next page.
Oh, okay.
But
Sorry.
nothing rhymes with purple, though.
No.
Or does it?
Purple,
Not in my vocab, it doesn't. But
purple and orange. I think they're both words that, anyway, listeners may dispute that. Let us know
yeah.
if we find
Ring
anything.
In. Phone in.
Phone in.
Send us a message. Purple, orange. I'm
Yeah.
sure both of them. Anyway. Yes, keep reading.
Out in the vineyard in the warm autumn sun, I pick grapes with my dad and my mum. Pick, pick, pick. For most of the day, Dad picks the most. It's always the way. If I could change another thing, I'd say Mum picks the most. It's always the way. Just to even it up a little bit,
Yes.
because there's a bit too much focus on the old fella.
Yeah.
Grapes are all picked and the vines are now bare. Our hands are all purple and nobody cares. These dark purple grapes, Dad says, are divine. They're just what we need to make dark purple wine. Dad empties the grapes from bucket to vat, and with his big feet he squashes them flat. Squash, 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 not missing a beat. Now not only his hands are purple, so are his feet. The juice fizzes away with a bubble and pop. That's fermentation. Dad's so proud of this wonderful drop. The bubbling juice is checked morning and night just to make sure that everything's right. And there's a scene where a young girl standing on the veranda in the dark with the light shining in the winery, with Dad's checking the ferment. The bubbling has slowed, so it's into the press. Out comes more juice and such a big mess. The juice has been bubbling, and during this time, the dark purple juice has become dark purple wine. So, yeah, Dad and his daughter standing alongside of the press. The wine is still fizzing. When filled into wood, it gurgles and splashes and all smells so good. The barrels are sealed and put on a rack. It's such a long way to the top of the stack. So I keep going?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please.
We're not far from the end.
Oh, I was going to say, we won't spoil the ending. Yeah, no, keep reading.
Why? What happens? Here we go. Wine ages in barrels in its own special way, so it's blending and tasting Dad's doing today. Dad thinks very hard as he measures and tests, and after a while he says, this one's the best. After aging in barrels for many a month, the wine comes out, but not by a pump. Dad huffs and puffs on the end of a hose, and from barrel to bottle the purple wine flows. With labels in place and corks in the tops, Dad packs all the bottles into a box. I'm so proud of this wine, my dad just said. It's so jolly nice, this dark purple red. My dad is a winemaker, and to me that's just fine. He's very clever because he's turned grape juice to wine. His hands are stained purple and now I know why. It's the dark purple wine. It's just like a dye. Dad and his noisy friends often meet, and guess what? They all have purple hands and purple feet. They share stories, laugh and talk very loud about their new wines of which they're all proud. Hey Dad, when I grow up, can I make wine too? And then I'll have purple hands and purple feet, just like you. And there we have it.
Beautiful.
That's the ending.
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
And so really on so many levels here. Number one, it's written, because it's written from a child's perspective, that's such, for our young writers, in schools, so nice to be able to celebrate, to think about, yes, what does, very easy for students to find the stories about a parent or a grandparent or somebody in their family about what they do, and to know about that, and to be able to write from, like, that is a story to tell. It doesn't have to be a story just about me, but it can be about my experiences within what a parent does, or a significant person in my life and what they do. So in the story, it ends with, the child in this one, who would be Sammy.
Yes.
Do you think she'll go into winemaking?
No.
Has she made that clear?
She's already been there. She's she's been the winemaker.
Yes.
And now she's got the next challenge, looking for, wildlife caring is what she's really keen on now. But it's funny, though, because at the time, that's when we were writing the book, putting the book together, a lot of the time was spent getting the illustrations right. The kids were keen to spend a bit of time in the winery, and I guess the novelty's worn off a little bit and there's other things to do. But no, the world's out there for kids these days, and often kids, I think parents, sometimes they go into what their industry is, but often they don't, do they? They tend to go off into some other area.
Find their own.
But they do learn a lot of things from their parents, like the drive that they've got, or the attitudes, or the, through all those things other things they see, they follow that.
Yeah, it's true, and we're just fortunate, I guess, for our kids that nearby is a local wildlife carer, and since I guess Sammy might have been about 8 and Jackson maybe 6, they helped after school, feeding the possums and repairing the animals that might have been injured, and caring for them, and learning that some don't make it and then some do. And now, probably Sammy a little bit more than Jackson, but both kids are so keen about looking after wildlife animals. We'd be driving along the road and Sammy says, "Oh, was that a parrot on the side of the road? It looked to be injured." Okay, we'll turn around and have a look. And sure enough, she spotted one, a few metres off the side of the road that's got a buggered wing. So let's go pick him up, put him in a box and, see if we can fix him.
Yes, yeah.
So we've got a collection of these animals at home now. So the wine's secondary.
Yeah.
But the hands-on, the real-life experiences, like you got to have some of those hands-on experiences early on, just by visiting the vineyard that your grandfather owned. There were ways to be involved in that, and I suppose that's really playing out again. It says through Sammy's interests and Jackson's as well that their hands-on experience is about getting their hands on the animals that are injured and navigating their way through those things. So hands-on experiences are essential for being able to build our knowledge and understanding of those things that actually build to the stories that we can then tell.
So my question to you, Sharon, is how would a teacher get more personal story writing going in the classroom?
Well, I think that we would begin by asking the question of what stories do we have? We all have stories to tell. And what are those stories? So getting those going, I think we would be doing that through a lot of oral to begin with, to start talking and sharing.
Thinkers talking.
Thinkers talking.
Yeah.
Oh, one of our timeless teas.
Yes.
Yes, very good, Phil. Glad you've made that connection. Yes, because stories aren't a static thing, and in fact, we would tell that story. Like by the time, in your instance, Wayne, by the time you got to tell that, you'd already had that story in your head. Maybe not in those words, but you had that. You'd been telling a story of being a winemaker for a long time.
Yeah, living and breathing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was a well-known and actually practiced story. So you'd talked it and shared that a lot before it came to be one that could come out for a younger audience to say, this is for my audience. And that's the other thing, thinking about who am I telling this story.
Yeah, so first of all, oral rehearsal where we're talking about it, but also you're saying, keep in mind who it's for.
Yes.
Because, Wayne, you had to keep in mind who you were writing it for, didn't you?
Yeah.
You'd always have that in your mind. Yeah.
Yes.
He actually at the time didn't really know the age
Oh,
group
right.
that we were aiming at, but thought it would be something around the age of Sammy and Jackson. It took us a couple of years to get it all together. But we've since found there's been kids of the age of 2 that can repeat some of these words and know what page those words appear on. And
Even if they can't read them?
Yeah. Because if there's been times we've heard, the book's been great in the wine industry. We've shared it amongst other winemaking buddies and other wineries have sold this for us too through their cellar doors. And there's been a good number of mates that have tried skipping pages so they can get to bed earlier,
Yes, it's the parent dilemma, isn't it?
Well, I've actually fallen asleep halfway through telling the story to my Sophie, I reckon. That was...
Yes, but that, you can't skip a thing when a child knows the story, and that's what the emergent reader is doing. They know the story. So
there's been many that we've, found winemaking buddies that have had to read the book to their child at night, and not just once but 2-3 times over, and we hear back, our kid loves this book, but I tell you what, I'm sick of it. So if they do try and skip a page, it's no, the kid pulls the page back. But we've seen in the winery when we've had it open for tastings, kids sit down and a sibling would be reading it to their younger brother or sister, and they're all engaged. And I don't know, there must be a few magic words in there that get them interested, because they may not know the processing of wine, of course, but there's plenty of colour and a bit of rhyme, and it seems to come together.
I think you found the voice in there of not only the process of the winemaking, but of really making language that brings that's what children are picking up on. It's the way something is said.
Yep.
It's done in a literary way. It's not everyday language. It's now I've got because that repetition, the way purple was absolutely the right word to be using, because every time purple is there in its phrasing, in that sentence, it's a thrill. It's back again, and you go, and there it is. And I just want to have that in my mouth. I want to, psychologically it's nice to think about the wine in that way. but it's that word, it's having that there, and to be able to let that roll out of the mouth, and with that rhythm, there's real rhythm as well as rhyme in it. So in that way, I can absolutely see why children... own that, take that on as that's what successful literature does. That's what, apart from, I was going to say that for so many children, that story is one where children see themselves in it.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's been, we have book week, or
Yes.
and there's dress up. You dress up as a character, and I've got that many photos of kids of friends of ours
yes.
that have got dressed up as that winemaker.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My dad has purple hands because their mum or dad does, and
Yes.
so they dress in the same outfit. It's funny,
Yeah.
every couple of years there's a vintage festival on the Barossa Valley, and part of that's a parade where old trucks from wineries and, you know, the local bands and other folk march down the street. And one year we thought, instead of having a Dutschke float, we would do my dad has purple hands. So we got the old red truck out and coloured it in purple, basically, purple balloons, and a bloke on the back that looked like the character in the book, reading the book to a couple of kids on the couch on the back of the truck. And the great thing about it is you got the streets lined with people, and I could hear comments made along the way, and there was a couple that made me giggle, actually. There was a kid going, "Oh, I've read that book," he's telling his mate. "Oh,
What a gem. Isn't that wonderful when you hear that? Yeah.
I've seen that movie."
Right.
I thought, no, maybe that's an idea. That's the next step. Might be a short movie, but
Well, we might just get the film rights, I think.
I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
So many kids knew the book
Yeah.
because the local schools, of course, had it in their library.
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, even though Grandma Judy didn't get to write her book, she made sure that this book was in her local library in California.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes,
And that-
where it has a real place
Yeah.
as well in California in grape growing.
Another famous region for dark
Yes.
purple wine.
Yes. Yeah.
And she can check online whether that book's been loaned out or not, and
Yes.
would often get the report back, you know, of how many times it left the shelf, and she'd go back into the library too and actually reposition it on the shelf in a good spot, like you do in the
Nice
supermarket.
marketing job there.
right.
Yes.
So there's the takeaways that I'm getting here are the reading, the rich reading from this, but also the kids doing their own personal story, their writing. So I think that's a couple of great angles on our podcast today.
I was just going to add into that lots of children will see themselves in that story, but it also helps us learn a whole lot more about the winemaking process and a very simple thing like why would I ever see anybody? And of course we've got, you know, some good winemaker friends as well, as we know, Mr. Lesky, who during vintage, you know, that's all we ever see
Purple
Pete
hands.
with is purple hands.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he's always getting asked, like, what's with the purple hands? So books are there. You know, this is that lovely example that they help us to learn more about our world and others. And so when I see someone with purple hands, I've got an entry point into talking to them about, are you a winemaker? Are you, or, you know, have you been crushing grapes lately? Let me check your feet. I'll soon know whether. So is the stain actually from the grapes or from the...
Yeah, it's from the grapes.
There's not a chemical reaction of anything being added.
No.
It's purely from the grapes.
Really, in making wine, you don't really add anything that's not natural to the grape, you know. So, and that might include, you know, topping up a ferment with some tartaric acid. I mean, not topping it up, but making an addition. Tartaric acid is the acid you find in grapes. But no, it's as soon as you're playing with grapes, it's amazing. And also filling barrels, if you stand over a barrel and a bit of red wine might overflow a little bit, or you pull the pipe out of the bunghole, you'll get wine on your hands, and it doesn't take long and your hands are black. Yeah. Purple, really.
And I really love the way that you're telling a story, but it draws us into the reality of that the winemaker's world. You know, I mean, we could get a factual book about winemaking, but it's so much more power in for kids, for a teacher to read to the kids or the kids to read for themselves a story that draws them into this world, and then you can go on to the other factual books as well. But that you are right, by doing all this, you've drawn the children into this world. And I mean, that's another thing, teachers can keep in mind in the classroom. Instead of going straight to the non-fiction books, let's find a story about this that we can use. Not that there would be a story for everything, like you found there wasn't something for winemaking. There's probably not stories for other things as well, but Sharon, there would be.
There's an opportunity there, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember nephew Reese saw that and he thought, we should do, my dad's an electrician. Or my dad's a sparky.
Yes, yes.
Truck driver or whatever it might be.
But story like you've done with doesn't all have to be like this, but you've had that rhyme and repetition like the Dr. Seuss books that really does draw the kids in, doesn't it? It's a surefire winner to have repetition and rhyme in a book.
Yes.
And the kids that can't read yet, they hear that rhyme and that repetition, and they find it easier to read along and remember what had been written and what's going to come.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a very powerful part of books for children.
Language.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sharon, before you were saying about getting the children to talk in the classroom, one of the great things that we've found in having a little winery is we've met folk that don't have wineries. They live another world. Mm-hmm. They're interested in our story, and if I shut up long enough, I like to listen to their story. And, when people come to visit us, it's one of the great things is to really hear their background and what they do. And like you said earlier, everyone has a story. We've met some famous people that, like our wines, but there's many folk that live a normal life that have just wonderful stories. And if you give them an opportunity, and especially if you've had a taste of wine, the story flows, and you get to hear so much more about them, and it's a real buzz. Some folk stay probably a little too long in our winery and run themselves late for the next appointment. But it's a great thing that we find is learning about others. And, no one knows the story as well as you, your own story, that is.
That's it.
And if you can become quite passionate about who you are.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think we all deserve to have people being interested in our stories. We have so much to learn from each other, but through telling our own stories, I think we also learn more about ourselves too.
Oh, for sure.
And I think teachers can tap into that with their children to get them to write by telling their story or their father's story or their mother's story or their grandparents. The teachers can tap into that to say, this is a way of really motivating my kids to write by telling their story, because that's, I think one of the things that a kid really identifies is with just their name. They love to write their name and know all the letters in their name. But next would come their story, really, the story about them.
Yes. And I think just like you've said too, Wayne, that sometimes we don't always know our own stories enough until somebody asks us.
Yeah.
Asks us a few things about we don't always know what our stories are.
No, we don't often take time to even reflect and look back at, what a good life we've had or still are likely to have in front of us, the experiences. I guess when you get older, I'm sort of thinking that way too, just reminding me of how I grew up and the funny things we used to do as kids.
Yeah, yeah.
But we had a visitor, Sammy brought home a friend the other day who's another one of these young kids interested in the environment.
Yes.
And I thought, hey, fantastic, and a Butte kid. And anyhow, he started asking me about, how I spent my time. And, like I say, I find it hard to be quiet sometimes. But I'm so lucky that I chose the wine industry because it allowed me to travel, work at various other wineries and just taking opportunities. I remember getting a phone call one day saying, hey, have you ever been to Spain? And I said, no. Well, do you want to go? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. I was meant to be, concentrating on my own wine, but I thought, no, blow it, I'll do this. And it was good fun, another great experience.
Yes.
And there's many people around that have a story like that to tell. You know, they've just taken a chance or they've been given an opportunity and it's taken them down a different path. And, yeah, I'm fascinated about people's stories,
Yes.
really am.
Yeah. I just want to make a couple connections then to the classroom about that, you know, we sometimes might say, because I can remember quite clearly, even with our own children, sort of asking our 4-year-old one day, you know, about what had happened in the day. He just looked at me and he said, well, what did you do today? And I thought, oh, yeah, tricky question. That's a big lot of thinking to do about just even thinking about what was happening in a day. But in our classrooms, you know, it's that richness of experiences that we can provide in classrooms, you know, the hands-on things that we do, the creating something, the making something. But sometimes it's the book that also brings the experience. When we can't go and do it for ourselves, reading about it, and this is one of the things that I certainly wanted to connect back to that you said before, Phil, was that we can bring information. We can bring information to students through factual text or through video or through film or whatever medium. But my goodness, it absolutely adds new layers and new depth when we bring it in a literary form.
Yeah.
Because it brings insights. It brings, you know, because really comes in at a human level.
Yeah.
It also allows the children to use their imagination a bit. Sure, there's
Yes.
illustrations in
Yes.
a kid's book like this, but, you know, if you read a book, your interpretation and what you see might be different to what someone else sees. And then you
Yes.
see the movie afterwards and it never quite matches the book.
Yes. Oh, I wonder if that little man thought that.
Oh, sure he
I
did.
did see a movie. Was it that one? So I'm actually thinking, like some of the books that, well, when we think about books in classrooms or in libraries, when we open up that idea that books are somebody's story, that it's a story that somebody's telling, then I think that's another way for children to access texts. And even thinking about classroom libraries, maybe there's even room for a collection about people's stories.
Yep.
This was the story they have to tell. So My Dad Has Purple Hands is a little girl's story about her dad. So thinking about some stories as being almost like family stories or from, you know, helping us learn about someone else's story, I think it's just another way to categorise some of our books and be aware of.
And we might have
books.
some listeners who can suggest
Yes.
books that they've come across.
Yeah. Because I'm even thinking of books like some of Roald Dahl's. There is a great book, and I don't have the copy anymore, but one was all about, I think it was called My Year. And it's just him writing about all the things that happened in each month of the year. And that's his story that he tells. And that, even as a model, is a wonderful way for students to be able to do that too. Write about what's my story I can tell, what's my January story, what's my February story, what's my March story.
Yeah.
So I think we can really look to books as models for letting us see how authors write their stories and share their stories, and how that can help us get on too with thinking about our own stories and finding out not just our own stories, but we have stories to tell about other people that we know.
Yeah. So we're opening up the conversation about getting kids to write or be really enthused about writing, really, aren't we?
Yes, yeah.
Through this.
Yeah, through talk. So really stemming again from a lot of it from reading and experiences, their own experiences, into talking, sharing those, and maybe, just like Wayne, they'll find the words to write that
Yep.
in a way that has real meaning for them and for others.
And keeping their audience in mind as well.
Yes. Yeah.
What about, Sharon, we now move on to our rapid fire questions.
Oh,
Can I just,
Oh,
before we
sorry,
do,
yes.
it's just something that comes to mind.
Yep.
And that's, you asked your 4-year-old, how did the day go, and what did you do?
yes.
As most parents ask their kids, how was your day? The answer's good.
Yep, and that's
you don't
it.
get much out of it.
No.
I thought, I'm sure I can, tap into Jackson. Hey, Jackson, how was your day? Oh,
Yeah.
good. Next day, I asked him, okay, Jackson, tell me something funny that happened at school today. And there was nothing from it. And then he started smiling and he goes, oh, I couldn't believe it. You know what happened? Johnny did this or, and then I'd do it each day.
Yeah.
And I was thinking if a kid needs to be enthused about writing a story, something that makes you laugh is a great topic because kids love to laugh, of course.
Yes.
And it got the best out of a conversation of my young lad telling me how his day went without just saying, how was your day?
Yes.
It was just another way of tapping in, and we both laughed when we got there. He just opened up and the story came out. It was fantastic.
Wonderful connection there, Wayne, because these rapid fire questions we're going to ask. No,
But you're right. Humour is fantastic. It's just a game changer.
Yeah, and getting us to think in different ways, not just in the same way. How was your day? But what else can I ask about a day? Because it's actually in asking the questions that we find out more about the stories. We've got a story to tell. What questions are we asking? And we've really been talking about these rapid fire questions as a possible tool in classrooms for getting us to think and talk about things in other ways that we might not have, that our generic kinds of questions aren't going to get that kind of response to.
Sure. Yeah.
So, first of all, I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer this question now that I've chosen which ones that I was going to ask.
Well,
but I'm going to ask it anyway. So when you were 12, think about, that would have been I know what year that was since we are the exact same age. So when you were 12, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up? Did you have
I'm not sure if I was specifically 12 years old, but when I was younger, I admired my uncle who happened to be a pilot.
Yes.
And I thought that would be great because, he lived in various places around the world and flew fast jets across the sky. And I thought that would be fun.
There's another whole story to tell.
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful story.
I'll ask the next one.
Okay.
What makes you laugh no matter what?
Well, it's going to be good. There's a big smile.
I don't know. I don't know.
A good joke?
Yeah. There's been times when we've laughed a lot, and it's typically around a table with a bunch of good friends.
Telling good stories? Or
Yeah. And guys with great senses of humour. I'm just thinking of a couple of American friends that we used to work together with at a winery during vintage.
Yes.
And long time ago, but we've kept to be friends, 40 years on almost now. So, or 35. Yeah, funny fellows and stories that get stretched, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Reminiscing.
So good company around a table with a good group. You're bound to laugh.
That's right. A glass of wine helps too.
Yeah. Always. All right, now, this is a question that we can only ask you, Wayne, because, well, I know there'd be others we could ask this, but we're asking this one specifically because each of your labels for your wines, I think, are micro stories. Because in your complete range of wines, you've got each has a name with a story behind it. So I'm just going to say some of those names,
Okay.
and you can, for some of them, just a quick answer. Well, this one will be a quick answer. Sammy, it's named Sammy because
Our daughter is Sammy, and
Jackson.
yep, he's our lad.
Yes. Now you've got a wine called Oscar Semler.
And Oscar was my grandfather, who was the fellow who introduced me to grapes and wine. Remember having a claret and lemonade with him when I was probably 12. There we are. And that made me laugh.
Yeah, that would have always you've got.
Yeah.
I can't actually ever imagine not having a good laugh with just about everybody telling stories in your family. Actually, let's just go back to the Jackson wine, because I think on the label you've actually got a bit of a story on there.
Yeah, as
Want
we
to
did
share a
with
little bit of that?
the Sammy label too. One of the reasons, I guess, that if I can just mention the Sammy label is when she was, I think, only about 6 weeks old, we had a Cabernet ferment going, and what we did is we grabbed some grape skins and a bit of juice and lowered her feet into that and made footprints on a white sheet of cardboard and rolled that up and sent it to the US for the grandparents. So when we came out with a Cabernet, there was an association of Sammy as a 6-week-old baby and Cabernet. Well, when, of course, we had our second kid, we had to come up with another wine, and we blended Cabernet with Shiraz. And we've only done this on a few occasions because you've got to have the right year to be able to do a good one. But, yeah, the comments on the back here, just to show what, I guess, the relationship between this wine and Jackson was that, you know, a big thanks go to Jackson, who entertains me with his many long stories while I tweak the blends. You know, there'd be many times he'd come over to the shed after school and just want to have a yarn and tell me of his day and what was funny.
Oh, my word. And there it is. And there
That's
it
right.
is. And
And that's
right there
on-
on that label, telling
Yeah.
the stories.
Yeah.
Everyone with their story to tell.
and
Oh,
Wayne,
no. Sorry.
Old
Yes.
codger.
Yeah, well, we've got a tawny. I was going to say tawny port. You're not meant to say port anymore. Well, you can't put it on the label. But, yeah, an old tawny that we do. And my dad was one of these old codgers that have a glass of port before going to bed most nights. And when I was in the industry, one of my first jobs was actually filling barrels with port and working with an old fellow at the winery. And every night before going home, we had to have a sip of port. If it was winter time, the port was in a flagon sitting on the cupboard. And if it was summer, it was in the fridge. But we'd sit there and his stories would come out and I'd listen. I was only 18, or might have been a bit under 18, but have a glass of port when he just liked to share a story about his life in the wine industry. And so the story of Old Codger is that, you know, there was many old fellows that used to have a drink of port, not so much these days. There's actually a lot of younger codgers actually getting into this stuff now, which is amazing. So, yeah, that's our bigger volume tawny that does very well for us. You know, we sell a fair bit into Europe, which is good fun. But even the label at the front was an old fellow that I saw walking down the road in Spain. So he doesn't know he appears on that label. But, yeah, it's an association of a fellow I worked with at the winery. Yeah.
Fantastic micro stories.
Yes.
Now, if you could make a documentary about anything, what would it be?
I don't know anything other than wine, unfortunately.
And fast planes.
I didn't know. I haven't learned anything about that except to watch them.
Are there good documentaries about wine, or is that something that you haven't?
It's probably something I wouldn't really.
No.
I don't get excited by them, to be honest, because you know the best things about the wine industry is the people in it. You know, it's not so much the chateau or the vineyard; it's the people that are behind the scenes, and that's where I've had most of my fun. You know, I'm just thinking of when I was working in Spain in 2002 with a guy called Sergio. We're out in the vineyards checking the grapes before vintage, and unfortunately for me, I was over there when Sturt were playing in the grand final against Centrals here, and I'd never seen Sturt win a grand final before. But I was getting messages on the phone and updates on how they were going, and they ended up winning. And so this fellow called Sergio, he was, a bit younger than me, but he was wanting to know what I was looking at all the time, and I got excited when Sturt, ended up winning the game, and I started singing the club song out there in Spain. It's the grand old flag, it's a high flying flag. And Sergio, after a while, we had to have a beer that night because I was celebrating, and so I taught him the song. And the next week, Brenda arrived in Spain. She got to go to the game. I didn't, unfortunately. And I said, just watch this. And so Sergio's with us in the bar having a beer, and, hey, Sergio, it's a grand old flag. It's the high flying flag. He couldn't speak English, but he knew the song. But I just think guys like that, he was so much fun, and yet he couldn't speak the lingo.
No.
And, humour for me is universal.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, where you come from and whatever. People like to laugh.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the wonderful folk that I've met in the industry, that's probably what the documentary would be on. Not so much squashing the grapes,
but the people.
the great people that you meet. Yep.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's another book in this. But who will write it? And will there be rhyme and repetition?
Probably not for the old fellas. Or maybe they need to have that
True.
introduced in their life again.
I just love how that just about came full circle again, because really everything is about story.
Yeah.
It is all of this richness. It's listening to story. So it's listening to others, so in our classroom context again, listening to stories, bringing stories to others and seeing the value and the wealth of what we learn from stories.
I think one of the real keys is listening.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And we don't often have enough time to listen. I'm guilty of that.
But we'd like people to listen to podcasts.
Again and again.
No, this was a good point. It's
No, it is.
true. Finding the time
To listen to others.
And that's why talking and sharing is a critical part of the daily classroom.
In the classroom.
Yeah. It's just because we are burning with stories.
Yeah.
So if we're burning with stories, then burning to write, that's where we...
I can see kids being enthused by this. They just press the right button, It's in there.
Yes.
You just got to get it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when a parent wrote to me a few years ago, talking about some of the writing that we were doing in class, this was year fives, and the mum wrote to me and said, after having read some of her son's writing, saying, I did not know he had such a deep well of stories within him.
Even at the age of 5.
No, year 5.
Oh,
so
year
he would
5.
have been
Sorry.
10, 11.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So, but we need to listen and we need to open the doors for that opportunity, for those stories to be told verbally, orally, and in writing.
So that's a tool or a technique or a tip?
Yes.
That's
listen. Today's. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm leaving people with. Yes.
The quick fire questions.
Yeah.
We're up to the next one, which is...
2 more quick fires. Off you go.
What are 3 words that describe living in Lyndoch on the vineyard?
Well, we actually don't live on a vineyard. We have our neighbour's vineyard out our window.
It's the neighbours.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I don't have any vines, or Brenda and I don't have any vines of our own, because we use Uncle Ken and Helen's vineyard, typically for most of our wines. Life up there is peaceful.
So peaceful is a good word?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The scenery it's fantastic. There's what excites me is seeing, Brenda and even Sammy popping outside to take photos at times, just when the light's right, or there's a kangaroo in the paddock or a rainbow. So many rainbows end up finishing just out our front window.
Sounds like heaven.
That's why they call it God's Hill, I
God's
suppose.
Hill Road.
You can see it from there. Yeah.
A second word. What do you think?
No, we've had peaceful.
Oh.
We've had
Maybe the scenery.
the scenery.
Yeah.
People.
I'll say this. I don't want to sound harsh, but for me, I'm not that social in Lyndoch. I, in many ways, would like to be, but I don't know. I get tucked away in the shed amongst the barrels probably a little too much. There's some there's many good people around for sure, but it's something that I don't have a lot of experience with. Put it that way, I'm not out there socialising. I don't go. I'm not one of those at the pub, or I'm not down the main street telling stories.
But you have people come to you, don't you? Like
Yes,
visitors.
yes,
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess the thing is to hear from other people what it's like with their experience coming there, because when you get locked up in that little bubble on your own,
Yeah.
it's often hard to appreciate it.
Yeah.
And nature is one of the great things there. You know, the sounds of birds and the funny animals we find in our yard at times, you know, koalas and goannas and all sorts. I mean, that for us, or even for me on my own, I love that. You know, so we're not spoilt by, you know, development of homes
Yep.
on our doorstep.
No.
There's plenty of open paddocks and paddocks with vines in. And so it's green all times of the year.
Yep.
Either the vines are green or the
So
grass.
very,
the grass is
very
good.
therapeutic, really.
Can be, except, you know, as long as you don't think it's like I often do, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yes. Yeah.
We're not separated from the work side of it enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And lastly, Wayne, what makes you smile?
A question like that.
I think you've told us.
Kids, friendly folk and just good people.
yeah.
People who are relaxed and like to share their story. It's probably a good way to finish off.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's so true. That makes me smile. And there was a guy I remember speaking once when I was at Regency TAFE here, and he ran a restaurant in Fort Lauderdale in Florida. And one of the questions he'd asked in an interview if he was looking for new staff to wait in his restaurant was, you know, what makes you laugh? And if he sees a smile on their face, he thought these would be good people to have waiting on tables. And if they've got a funny story to tell, they're the sort of folk he wants.
Yeah.
So seeing other people happy, you know, seeing
Yep.
especially kids these days, because I worry a lot about the electronics that take up so much of their life, and not only kids' lives, but everyone's life. And we forget about what it's like to just hang out with folk.
Yeah.
So that makes me smile.
Yeah.
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 And being
That's
great.
so come through, you know, I think, and you've brought a lot to us today to really make us smile about the love, you know, we love the story. Now, the book is available on your website?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. We've
So
put it on the
for-
website, and I think Amazon still has the book available.
So it's Dutschke Wines.
Yeah, Dutschke Wines is all one word, Dutschke. It's a difficult one. Wines.com. Yeah, no AU.
Yeah.
That's who we are.
Yeah.
It's one of those German words, isn't it, where it's got a lot of consonants after
Every consonant.
every consonant you can think of.
Yeah. And I'll throw a couple more in.
Yes, throw something in, you know. Let's make it more complicated. Like,
What haven't we got in there yet? Yeah.
but and then we thought we could end up our podcast sessions saying the word teacher in a different language, and we thought German might be a really good language for today, considering, you know, the German background. So the word for teacher, and I don't know how to pronounce it.
With no German background, so relying on the two
German.
here with some German heritage. What is it, Phil?
Well, I would say the masculine is Lehrer
Yeah.
Yes.
That sounds right.
That would be it.
and the female Lehrerin.
Could be.
don't
That
know.
sounds plural.
Maybe we can have a listener
Phone in.
correcting us. Anyway,
It was a nice try.
I've had an attempt, and now I'm going. I'm sorry.
I think you've done well.
So special thanks to Wayne today, and thank you everyone for listening today, and hope you enjoyed our podcast, and look forward to having you all listen to our next one. And
Yeah. And you know, there may be some people who might even like to just make contact with us. We've all got a story to share. We've all got stories to tell.
Yep.
And maybe there are some stories that you have found the words to now tell that you would like to share further than just with yourself, or share them with students, or, we would love to hear those stories too.
And loving that lots of people are subscribing from all parts of the world. But here in Australia particularly, but all parts of the world, we're getting lots of subscribers, and we'd love to hear from any of you. Go to our website, Q Learning website, and you can make contact with us there. But thank you, everyone, for being with us today.
Thanks, Wayne.
Good on you. Thank you.
It's been great.
It has been.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.